It is recorded after pilots agreed to fly, their rosters were sent, they canceled those flights. IndiGo needs to hire 1,000 pilots. But IndiGo, to vehemently fight, shirk off, and intentionally, surreptitiously plan this whole blitzkrieg so the regulation gets repealed, it actually wrecks IndiGo's own integrity and credibility. IndiGo wanted to put pressure on the government.
It's been a week since the Indian civil aviation sector came to a screeching halt with multiple cancellation of flights by the IndiGo, which is the major player in the civil aviation sector in India. And today in Parliament on Monday, the Civil Aviation Minister, Ram Mohan Naidu, finally spoke in the Rajya Sabha. Joining me today in this conversation is Mark Martin, who is a civil aviation security expert. Thank you, Mark, for joining in and speaking to Deccan Herald. My first question to you is that the skeptics say that this crisis was avoidable. How do you see it? Do you see that, I mean, people say that it's manufactured. Do you see it as a manufactured crisis, or do you see that it was coming and they just, did not do enough to manage it?
Hi, Sumit. Thanks so much for having me on Deccan Herald. I think we have to be very, very clear. I'm going to start with the first point you mentioned. The minister coming now and saying that we'd set an example and we'd hold those to task, and it doesn't make sense. It's inconsequential. The ministry and the DGCA have already granted an extension to IndiGo last Thursday and Friday, so they gave in. The ministry and the government blinked. They blinked to airline pressure. So if the government really wants to take action, I dare the government to right now withdraw and repeal its extension given to IndiGo. Because IndiGo now is
But the government says that could create, there's already chaos there.
But then that's fine. The whole idea is that, and I'm going to come to the other point. The point is this FDTL regulation, Sumit, was put into circulation in 2022. The DGCA, as part of something called collective decision making, releases regulation for industry comment. IndiGo was given ample time to comment. They did. They put their comments in. So did Air India. So did Akasa and SpiceJet. Everybody put their changes. Everybody wanted changes. Changes were incorporated in this regulation. Then a second draft was released in 2024. IndiGo again vehemently resisted this. And as we all know in the industry, and even the media is aware of this, that IndiGo did lobby also very hard with the DGCA to change this regulation. Eventually, all airlines were given a good 9 months to comply to the new regulation. Every airline did. Air India did. They hired more pilots. SpiceJet did, and so did Akasa. What IndiGo did was willfully let the clock run out, wait for the last moment, and use this as a pressure tactic on the government. Now, the whole point is that, we come to the whole discussion of how sinister and how premeditated is this. Now, when you were told to comply with
are you alleging that this is intentional? This was intentional?
Oh,
are you saying that?
Absolutely, by all means. When you're told to comply with a regulation, a safety regulation, that is cast in stone. You don't deviate from it, because you know why? It's in the interest of safety. And the world watches you. And when I say the world watches you, I talk about the European Aviation Safety Agency audits the DGCA, the International Civil Aviation Organization audits the DGCA, and so does the FAA. And you guys also write a lot about the FAA and ICAO audits, right? It's the same law. Now, when every other airline compliant, Air India complied, Akasa and SpiceJet, IndiGo chose not to comply. Now, even in a scenario where there is a pilot shortage, a pilot shortage will affect some amount of flights of your total flight schedule. Out of 1,000 flights, it might affect about 100 or 200. You might have to reschedule flights. I've had the pilot shortage problem in my career as well. I've managed 5 airlines. So you realign flights, you reposition crew, and try and make the schedule work. But when IndiGo canceled all 1,000 flights, It is recorded after pilots agreed to fly, their rosters were sent, they canceled those flights on Saturday. That was an extremely clear message that Indigo wanted to put pressure on the government.
I mean, if you look at it, the new norms obviously have been put in place, uh, keeping in view the passenger security and the international norms as they exist across the world as far as the civil aviation sector is concerned. Now, giving this sort of an exception, I mean, although the government has said that the passenger security has not been compromised, do you think that I mean, setting an example like this, it doesn't augur well for the civil aviation industry in India?
Oh, certainly not, Sumit. I agree with you. When you go, never in the history of the DGC or any regulator in the world, never do you roll back on a safety regulation because safety affects all those who fly, all those who are on the ground, pilots, and the traveling public. Safety regulations is a non-negotiable. It's off the table. Airworthiness can be negotiated because aircraft are reliable, they have checks and balances, they have safety systems. So you can extend an airworthiness regulation here and there and give airlines some more time, maybe a few hundred hours, a couple of weeks. It's possible. Never in the history has any regulator, or including the DGCA, gone back on a regulation. And this will have a rippling effect with the world because let me be very, very direct with you. It's just been 4 months that we've seen one of the worst air disasters in India, Air India 171. The world looks at India differently. The world has always prejudiced India and branded us as being an aviation environment that's unsafe, regulators which are not taking safety seriously, lax, highly bendable and stretchable with the law. And guess what? Not Friday, we went back on the regulation. What we have done is we have reinforced all the doubts that every regulator and every safety organization in the world had all along. Extremely alarming and concerning, not just for the traveling public, but for everybody.
But tell me, Mark, tell me something that you have been, you have monitored, you have been following the civil aviation industry very, very closely. I mean, across the world, do you see this sort of a monopoly of a particular flyer, or is India an exception where two out of every three passengers are flying only just one airline?
So Sumit, 5 years ago we had Goer and we had a Jet Airways. Now after Jet Airways collapsed, we lost 180 aircraft from the register. After Goer collapsed, 60 aircraft left, so that's roughly 240. And then, as a result of Pratt& and Whitney's engine, GTF engine failing, almost 85 aircraft of IndiGo were grounded. Now, what has happened is that our fleet size has shrunk dramatically. But what happens is when your fleet size is low, on an average, we were doing about 11 hours of utilization a day per aircraft. Now, when the fleet reduces, the same aircraft starts flying more, right? Because you need to fly to more destinations. So we ended up flying 15, 16 hours. This added a tremendous amount of strain on the crew, and IndiGo, being the largest airline by market share, by network, okay, and fleet, the two different parameters here, as you understand, um, should have been more mature, more distinguished, and certainly have more integrity to comply with the safety regulation. When you're market leader, the objective is to set an example. The objective is to lead by example. And what they should have done is complied with it and gone ahead with the implementation of the new CER just to prove a point that we're IndiGo and we believe in safety. But IndiGo, being a market leader and a market listed company, to vehemently fight, shirk off, and intentionally, surreptitiously plan this whole blitzkrieg so that the regulation gets repealed, it actually wrecks IndiGo's own integrity and credibility. And it's going to take a long time for IndiGo to rebuild that trust, not just with the travelers, you and me, the media, DGCA, or the government, with their own OEMs and with the lessors that lease them aircraft, with banks, with Airbus, with CFM, their key vendors, because now the world will see them differently.
when the government is saying, and when the IndiGo is saying that, uh, give us, say, by February first week, second week, they're going to put things back in order. Now, if there is such a crunch of pilots, you're looking at a situation wherein, I think it takes almost, I think the mandatory norm is 6 months of notice period. If you get a pilot from somewhere else, then you need to acclimatize that pilot to the machine or the bird that he or she is flying. You think that this 2 months, 3 months time is enough to tide over this entire crisis, or you think that it's just a deadline which has been set and it would be very difficult to meet?
So, Sumit, there's no magic wand to this, as we all know. When you hire a pilot just to convert his license and bring him online, it takes 45 days. Now, Indigo needs to hire 1,000 pilots. It's a it's a
So you're
Herculean
saying that they
task.
need another 1,000 pilots to actually put things in order?
Yes, so Martin Consulting in its analysis has found out that Indigo needs, based on its current utilization, its current fleet and current network, they need a minimum of 1,000 pilots to get over this madness. And they need mostly commanders, experienced, qualified commanders, not co-pilots. And in this, the biggest challenge I see with the way Indigo's resisted a crew fatigue norm, where crew needs to be given rest and not put on 2 consecutive night flights. And to see Indigo resist this, no pilot in his right senses is going to leave a cushy job in Qatar or Emirates or in AirAsia, Malaysia, and come running, jumping to fly with Indigo. So Indigo has actually shot itself in the foot with this whole fiasco that they've gotten themselves into. And rightfully that the minister is taking stern action, but I don't know what does the minister mean when the ministry is already given into the pressure. So I think very clearly it's about holding you accountable. In this country, only when you create a law that pinches do people react, and there has to be a monetary fine and a penalty on Indigo.
One last thing I would want to know from you, running short of time. What are the lessons learned from this? I mean, what are the couple or 2 or 3 important lessons that the civil aviation industry in India should learn? Should we move away from this monopoly or a duopoly of in the Indian civil aviation sector? And what is the way ahead if we were to normalize things?
Well, Sumit, it's wishful thinking to move away from the duopoly now. It takes a minimum of 12 months to set up a new airline and a minimum investment of $1 billion. So anybody who's got a deep pocket that deep enough has to put that money in, because guess what? Banks are not going to support an airline venture, especially in India after Kingfisher Airlines, Indigo, and Go Air. So we're in a catch-22 situation. We've painted ourselves into a corner. It would be a miracle if somebody has a genuine intent to start an airline, but even that would take 12 months. So we have no other option right now but to grin and bear it. I hope that the cost of airfares come down. There's some sense of semblance and sanity with the rest of the carriers. I know Air India has increased its flight frequencies, and so has Akasa. And the only thing that Indigo can do is eat humble pie, start hiring crew, set its house in order, and to some extent win back its credibility that's been pretty much lost and destroyed.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for speaking to Deccan Herald. That's all we have in today's edition of Deccan Herald Newsroom. We'll see you again tomorrow with our latest edition. Thanks much for watching.
Thanks so much for having me, Deccan Herald. Pleasure to be with you.